Hello, and welcome back to Immersion Gaming. First off, I want to apologize for how long it's actually taken this video to come out. With the last video, the World of Warcraft video, there was a lot more talk about the narration, which is something I spurred by mentioning it, than there was actually about the video. And the reason for that was I had actually just been reading off the script, and while I think I am a better writer than I am someone who can just come up with stuff on the fly, I guess my narration needs work. So with that in mind, I kind of rethought the process of how I was going to do this, and I decided to go with more of a conversational thing. I'm not reading any script right now, I'm just reading notes. So the trade-off is less fancy words, but hopefully more conversational feeling, more natural flowing, but a little bit more uhs and pauses, because that's just the way people talk, and I can't avoid that because I'm not a professional anything. Okay, so with that nonsense out of the way, let's get to what we're actually supposed to be talking about today, and that is role-playing. So I want to start off with a story. This goes back to the days where I was playing The Old Republic. This is probably the first few months when it was out. I don't remember the exact year it came out, but I remember the general time of year. I was in a guild. We were on an RP server. I don't remember the name of the RP server anymore. It's long since been merged into their mega server thing. Maybe it's Harbinger? I don't remember. Anyways, I was in a guild. We were a fairly large guild for the time, somewhat popular on the server, Republic Guild, and a lot of our peers in it, because we were a role-playing guild on a role-playing server. And Skyrim had come out, and I really enjoyed Skyrim. I played it for hours and hours and hours. Even now, it's still my most played game on Steam, several hundred hours. And one of the guys in our guild we were talking about one night, he said he could not get into Skyrim. And I was like, how could you not get into Skyrim? And he's like, it didn't grab him, it didn't lead him anywhere. He felt like he needed more prompting from the game, engaging him as to what to do. And I was confused, because to me Skyrim was just the ultimate sandbox, and once you started applying mods, it just became the game you wanted to. And here's this guy who is a very good role player in the context of the game we were playing at the time, saying he couldn't role play in Skyrim, which confused me, because I had no problem role playing it. For me, every minute in Skyrim was like just a moment of immersion. And I thought about it, and at the time I wrote the guy off as just like, well, you have no taste in games, you obviously not as good as a role player, blah blah blah. But in the years since, I've realized there are just a lot of interpretations of just what role playing is. And to him, role playing was, at least in the context of a game, assuming the role of a character and going where the game leads you and picking your dialogue choices, essentially. And in absence of that, in like a roleplay sense on our server, you could interact with other people. They would say things, you would say things back. That's a pretty common interpretation of roleplaying. But the difference between him and me was I was projecting a persona onto my character in Skyrim that needed no interaction to feel like I was immersed in roleplaying in the game. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, because there are multiple types of roleplaying. There's the roleplaying where, you're on the Warcraft server, and you're playing an elf, and you're standing there, and some human says something and you say something back, that sort of thing. There's role-playing in the context of a BioWare game like Mass Effect, where someone says something and you get to pick from your 6 dialogue options. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And then there's role-playing in the immersion sense, and this being the immersion series, that's kind of the one we're going to focus on today. I was going to call this style true RP, but I think that was a little presumptuous, and let's just refer to it as immersive role-playing, or maybe single-player role-playing, even though you can use it in a multiplayer game if you wish. It shouldn't be hindered based on the genre of game you're playing. So looking at RP in this form, it's less about, I guess, interaction and more about setting a persona for your character, setting boundaries or rules. Like, my character hates cabbages, or my character will kill every bear they see. Those are very simplistic things, but they're basically the heart of it. And there are games just like that where you need to kind of set yourself some rules, or you're just gonna, rip through the game and really get no satisfaction out of it, to various degrees, depending on how much you enjoy that sort of content. I mean, if you played Skyrim, which we're using as our example right now, and just followed the quest prompts right from River, whatever it's called, all the way up to the end, you've probably done that game in 6 hours, if that. If you do something like I did, you get 400 hours of playing time across various characters, of course, but it's always a unique experience as long as you're kind of doing your own thing. I guess I could best explain it by giving some examples. There is a great mod out there called Live Another Life, where basically it allows you to bypass the starting area of Skyrim and kind of choose a different sort of history for your character. You also have the option to get into the main storyline whenever you want, but there's probably like a dozen or so other options you can go with, like you were a necromancer hiding somewhere, you were robbed and left for dead, you just arrived on a ship, that sort of thing, or you were a bandit. That's kind of an interesting one. So 2 examples are, one of my characters I played was a bard who lived in Solitude. So you started at the Bard College. There was an option to start as a member of one of the guilds. I picked the Bard's College, and I just wandered around being a bard. There's some great bard mods out there. It allows you to play instruments and actually make coin, and then I kind of eased myself in the story from there. That was very basic. I mean, there wasn't too many rules involved, but it kind of put me in the mindset of, someone who just travels around and sees these things occurring in the world and react according to them. Another interesting character I think I tried was I played a character who honestly did not get involved in the main storyline for quite a long time. I played this character as kind of an apprentice to a ranger, and I just kind of picked an area. I limited this character to just kind of living around the Falkreath area in the southern forests, and just played them as, just a ranger or a scout living in the woods, kind of keeping the roads safe, interacting with people, doing their little quests, but never really getting involved in the main quest until much later. And it was interesting because it was just more of a mundane thing, and I tried to avoid people. Like, I tried to kind of play a person that was in the woods, only going into the smaller cities to trade, sort of thing, on the outskirts of whatever I needed to, and trying to live off the land. That was a fun thing, especially when you involve mods like Frostfall and the other mods that make you like have to eat and drink and stuff like that. And that's part of what made Skyrim so excellent to me as an immersive role-playing thing, which is part of the reason I couldn't understand why other people couldn't get into it, was I don't think they were looking at the way I was. And maybe that's where this video can help people, is to allow you to take a different look at a game where you thought it maybe was a little flat story-wise. And let's be honest, Skyrim's story is pretty linear. It's more about how you're going to interact with things and how you're going to interact with the 900 other things that aren't actually involved with the main quest. And part of that was the mods. And I can't name all the mods because honestly I have 100 mods for Skyrim, but a big one was Frostfall to me, which is a mod that basically dictates how warm and cold you are, takes into effect hypothermia, temperatures and stuff like that, keeping dry, the warmth of your armor. These sound like annoying things, but honestly they really add to the immersion. If you want to go up north and go from island to island and jump in the water, well, you're going to die probably in 30 seconds unless you get your butt in gear and light a fire, that sort of thing. Of course, the standard food and water ones, sleep, just immersive clothings and different monsters and stuff that, things to help the game seem more realistic, and Skyrim has a great bevy of those. And like I said previously, these are all things, along with your own imagination and dictating a character with a persona, that can help you have a lot more fun in a game that maybe initially seemed a little light story-wise. That can also apply to a game like Fallout 4. Fallout 4 was another game I enjoyed immensely because I took a very immersive, single-player RP approach to it. And I think a lot of people just kind of played through the storyline as themselves, were a little disappointed with the questing, and that was that. Fallout 4 was very polarizing, and that was surprising to me because, once again, I was playing it differently than I think a lot of other people were. That said, Fallout 4 is going to be its own video in the future, and we're going to talk a lot more about why my experience may have been different from yours. Maybe you enjoyed Fallout 4. I'm not judging. A lot of people did. The game sold a lot of copies, but as I said, it was a very polarizing topic, especially if you get on the Reddits and the tweets and the things like that. People had a lot of mixed opinions. So how about our immersive role-playing method applied to a more traditional RPG? Generally, a game such as the Mass Effect games, or just really any BioWare RPG. Dragon Age Inquisition is the most recent. Honestly, and this is coming from perhaps the most overblown BioWare fanboy. I say fanboy, I'm 40 years old. Fan there is. I love the Mass Effect series. I cannot wait for Andromeda. I loved Dragon Age Inquisition. I don't see why everyone else didn't love it. Most people liked it, but there's always someone nitpicking. There's always someone taking a jab at BioWare. I love those games. I love the world. The lore is fantastic. The characters are really interesting. That said, our immersive role-playing really does not apply that well to these games. It's for a lot of different reasons. You're limited in the map size. It was a little bit better in Dragon Age Inquisition, but in past games it's been definitely more limited. The dialogue, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, you definitely have more dialogue options than you do with a Bethesda game, but in that it's almost limiting in its own way, because the dialogue options in Skyrim and Fallout 4 are just so damn simple. You almost kind of mentally just, I'm pressing this button, but this is what I'm really thinking. But when you get really immersed into your own character in these BioWare style games, that's kind of what you're saying, and you're almost along for the ride at that point, where you decide, I'm going to be a good guy, I'm going to be a jerk, I'm going to be a smartass, and then at that point, you're kind of not that character, you're kind of controlling that character. Keep in mind, like I mentioned in the World of Warcraft video, we're not grading these games. I'm not saying Dragon Age is a bad game. I'm not saying Fallout 4 is a great game. I mean, I think those things, well, I think Dragon Age is a great game, but I think all these games I play are great. But we're not grading them on their overall quality. We're just saying how what we're speaking of at the time applies to them. And what I'm saying is this immersive style RP that I have kind of really gotten into with games, especially Bethesda games, doesn't really apply to those style of, BioWare style games. Doesn't really apply to CRPGs either. So we're not grading the games here. We're only looking at how this style of RP applies to it. So where does our immersive RP apply? Not in the BioWare style games. I'm just going to call them BioWare style games, even though a lot of other games go with that style of RP. Oddly enough, they don't really fit too well with CRPGs, which generally give you more dialogue options, but at the same time, you're still kind of along for the ride. You've kind of decided what type of character you're going to play, and the worlds are generally less immersive. So where does this style of RP apply? Well, obviously in the Bethesda style games that I mentioned ad nauseum, as kind of the inspiration for it. That's fine. We know that much, and we can talk about that in future videos. We'll definitely have a Skyrim video, of course, in the future, and the Fallout 4 one I mentioned. Oddly enough, they also apply very well to MMOs. And you might think that's strange, because MMOs generally are some of the weaker role-playing games compared to, a Mass Effect or a Planescape Torment or that sort of thing. But there are a lot of times when you're kind of left to your own devices by yourself. A lot of time playing an MMO is spent by yourself. So it's a lot of time to get into your characters' heads. The interactions are very minimal, so you're kind of making decisions, once again, in your own head. And with a little imagination and a willingness to do it, you'll find that a character is more likely to grow in the wide gaps of your imagination than it would be in the steady flow of information that you get in certain RPGs. What I mean when I say that is it's easier to come up with a personality and a character for the person you see on the screen if it's mostly just you in a wide open space with nothing else influencing. So like, I could even look at a person like a little citizen in City Skylines and come up with this entire background and story for them if I really wanted to, compared to say Geralt of Rivia, who is a very robust and interesting character and has all this history and past, but really my interaction with him is how I want to kill things and if I want to be a jerk or not. And that's not an indictment of the game. Witcher 3 is probably the best RPG that's come out in years. But this is just a different sort of RP. And it's a different way to look at those hands and that sword the next time you play Skyrim. But I think that's enough for role-playing for today. I wasn't really planning to get into any deep analysis. This is more just an introductory thing, so when we discuss role-playing in future videos, we can kind of look back on this and go, this is what I was talking about, that sort of thing. That said, of course, we're always open to discussion, be it about my narration, or of course the video itself. If you want to talk about RP, maybe share some RP experiences you've had in games where maybe RP didn't seem like it was going to work. So remember, role-playing isn't always about interacting with other people. Sometimes it's just being in your own head and deciding, this is how this character is going to interact. This is how this character is going to live their lives. Next time on Immersion Gaming, we're going to look at Fallout 4 and see how immersion and role-playing just might change the way you look at the game. Until then, this has been Josh from 1047, hoping you're getting the very best out of your games, and we'll see you next time.